for ATL Prime Sports. Todd Corder here with you in Atlanta, Georgia. Got Wayne, our producer, in Memphis. No JJ, no Larry. We have a special guest this evening, Dave Cohen, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers. We'll be with him momentarily. What's coming up on the show? Braves are sitting out this round. They're waiting on the Marlins or the Phillies. Does that hurt them to sit and wait? Do the Braves have rotation concerns heading into the playoffs? Is it time for the Falcons to pull Desmond Ridder? And last but not least, Urban Meyer to Michigan State, rumors, opinions, and then our pick six right here on ATL Prime Sports. Let's get to our guest, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers, Dave Cohen. And Dave, tough loss last week. Panthers are 4-1 overall, 1-1 in the Sun Belt, losing to Troy 28-7. They're off this week. They'll play at Marshall at home on the 14th of October at 7 p.m. Let everybody know tickets are as low as $11 on Vivid Seats. And Dave, the second half screams out at me. They were outscored in the third quarter 15-0, 22-0 overall. That just seemed to be their bugaboo. They really couldn't get much offense going neither. 298 yards of total offense, held 105 on the ground. They had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions from Darren Granger. It just wasn't a great day for the Panthers.
No, you're right about that, and it's a gauntlet the rest of the way when you look at the rest of the schedule, starting with Marshall coming up after an off week this week. October 14th, homecoming, the Thundering Herd of Marshall will pay a visit to Center Park Credit Union Stadium. But, we got through the first 4 games without any interceptions, only a couple of turnovers, and the turnover bug bit on Saturday against Troy. And Troy's a good football team, don't get me wrong. I think I said this when we were on last week, that in the span of 2 weeks, Georgia State was playing Coastal Carolina on the road and Troy at home. And those are the 2 teams that played for the Sun Belt Conference Championship a year ago, and Troy won it. So we're not talking about, one of the bottom feeders in the Sun Belt. And, of course, there really are no bottom feeders in the Sun Belt from what it looks like this year. So, for Troy to go on the road, play well, force Georgia State into the 3 turnovers, I'm not surprised by it. It's just one of those things that when you think back and you go back and you watch that game and you think about that game, fumbling the football inside the 1-yard line when you're about to score really hurts. That if they hand the ball to Marcus Carroll or Darren Granger's able to, take the snap and run it in, now it's 21-14. All of a sudden the trajectory of the game changes possibly a little bit. But, as Coach Elliott said in his post-game press conference, it's tough when you're trying to play Troy, but you're also playing against yourself most of the ball game, and that's kind of what Georgia State found themselves in situation-wise against Troy last week. But, Troy, again, very good football team. They won the Sun Belt Championship last year. It just would have been really, really cool to be 5-0, after a 4-8 season last year. To start out 5-0, which they've never done before, would have been fantastic. But, as we've talked about this week down at Georgia State, after a 4-8 start or a 4-8 season a year ago, let's look at it on the positive side. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that Georgia State would be 4-1 heading into their off week, most of us would have signed off on that. So it's a very positive situation that we're in right now, being 4-1. The extra week, I think, comes at a good time. Win or lose against Troy, you get the extra week to prepare for Marshall. But as I said, it's a bit of a gauntlet from here on out when you look at who they've got to play, starting with Marshall, then Appalachian State. You got James Madison, you got Georgia Southern. You have a late game in mid to late November at LSU, which is your out of conference guarantee game. So they're going to use this off week. I was at practice earlier this week. They're going to use a little bit of the extra week to get ready for Marshall and hopefully pick up steam again as they head into what we'll call the middle portion of their schedule.
All right. Hey, Dave, let's we talked about the 298 yards total on offense. That was season low, held to 205 yards on the ground, the turnovers, the interceptions. The defense gave up 154 on the ground and 256 in the air. And also, Georgia State lost the time of possession by over 9 minutes. Just something that, that's hard on the defense, first of all. And second of all, they weren't able to get important stops in the game to get that offense back on the field.
Well, again, Troy didn't win the Sun Belt Championship a year ago because they're not a good team. They returned quite a few of the, key players from last year's team, starting with their quarterback, Gunnar Watson, who I was very impressed with last Saturday. A local Atlanta area kid from Marietta High School, Kamani Vidal, was their main running back. That's a kid who's one of the top, let's say the top 5 running backs in the Sun Belt Conference. They've got decent receivers. They've got an experienced offensive line. They're good defensively. That's a good Troy football team. I mean, they could very well be in the running for a Sun Belt championship again this year, depending on what they do in the Sun Belt West. So you're right. I mean, the killer drive was there in the fourth quarter. When Troy needed to take control of the game in the fourth, they put together a drive that went just over 8 minutes and ended up with their 4th touchdown of the afternoon, which put the game away. But they put together the kind of drive that they needed late in the game, fourth quarter, to keep Georgia State's offense off the field, keep an already tired and worn-out defense on the field, and they end up winning the football game 28-7. Again, it was very un-Georgia State-like. Georgia State's a team that's been averaging 37 points a game. They were held to 1 touchdown. Again, turnovers were a big part of that, but give credit where credit's due. And Troy, played the better game. Troy did what they needed to do to come into Atlanta, play a good game, get out of Atlanta, and head back to Troy with a W. Remember, Wayne, Georgia State played on a Friday night at Memphis, 3 years ago?
Yeah, back when we used to play each other pretty regular.
Yeah, well, that football game was ugly on our part. Memphis played really well that night, but I always enjoy my trips to Memphis. And over the years, Georgia State has played the Tigers in basketball, going back to the days when Memphis played at the Pyramid, which I know now is a Bass Pro Shops.
Right.
But I like Georgia State playing Memphis and vice versa as much as some common opponents that I would like to see Georgia State schedule on a regular basis: Memphis, Charlotte, Alabama, Birmingham, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah.
Those 5 right there are 5 good opponents that I'm not saying you're going to play them every year, but they should be on the schedule as non-conference opponents right now more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Dave, always glad to have you on and glad that you join us all the time that you have, because you could be doing other things. But you jump on to talk with us about Georgia State athletics, and, you got off week, get a chance to rest up, get it right. You got a great season up to this point. Nobody really liked what the end result was Saturday, but you get a break. Thunder and Herd head in next week. What your thoughts on what the Panthers need to do to get back to Panther football? The kind of Panther football they've played up to this one point in the season, except with the game against Troy. But for the most part, the first quarter of the season they played well. What do they need to do to get back in their winning ways?
Well, I'll tell you, Larry, what worries me a little bit about Marshall, and I've just started doing my preparation work for the Thundering Herd. They're 4-0. They have transitioned seamlessly into the Sun Belt Conference in football and men's and women's basketball. But just starting to work on my prep sheets today, they're big on that offensive line. Left tackle came in at 6. The starting left tackle was 6'9", well over 300 pounds. The right tackle was 6'7", just over 300 pounds. So this is a big, maybe a bigger than what we'll say normal Marshall team. And as much as we talk about Marcus Carroll, and I think Marcus is one of the top 5 running backs in the Sun Belt, you can't argue with his numbers. We're going to see another outstanding running back from the Thundering Herd in Rasheen Ali when we play them on the 14th. So Georgia State defensively, going to have to be able to handle their offensive line as best as possible and going to have to keep an eye on Rasheen Ali. I'm not sure exactly yet what kind of a passing offense they're going to bring in, but I can tell you they can run the ball with the best of them in the Sun Belt Conference. One thing, if you look around the Sun Belt Conference, I mean, look at it. We just saw Kamani Vidal, one of the top backs for Troy. We see Marcus Carroll every week. We're about to see Rasheen Ali. There's a lot of good running backs, and you can look at it statistically in the FBS stats among the top backs, ball carriers in FBS football. You're gonna find 3 to 5, maybe 6 Sun Belt ball carriers, ranked statistically amongst the best ball carriers in FBS football. And we're about to see another one on the 14th. So from a defensive standpoint, got to keep an eye on Rasheen Ali and not let him have a big breakout day. Vidal, it's not that Vidal had a huge breakout day, but he still had a really good ball game, was a big part of, as TC pointed out, a big part of the ball control and the time of possession advantage that they ended up having over Georgia State last Saturday.
Dave, I tell you what, Marshall, they pose a lot of problems up front, just like Troy. What does Georgia State going to need to do offensively to get back on track besides win that battle up front?
Well, obviously Darren Granger's going to have to throw the ball to Georgia State players, which he's done most of the year. He just had a couple of interceptions. Those were his first interceptions all year. Other than that, Darren's been fantastic for the most part through the first 4 games this year. But again, as I said, we're about to go through a gauntlet. Don't confuse Rhode Island and Connecticut and even Charlotte with Troy, Marshall, James Madison, Appalachian State, Georgia Southern, LSU, Louisiana Lafayette. We're about to hit a gauntlet here with regards to our schedule. There's not a game left that you would feel comfortable picking up a pencil and penciling in a W. Every game is going to be a knockdown, drag-em-out battle, whether it's at home or on the road for Georgia State the rest of the season. The one game I look at that I would not right now rank up there with those teams that I just mentioned would be the final game of the regular season, albeit on the road at Old Dominion, because who knows what Old Dominion will look like by the time we get to the end of the season. Who knows what Georgia State will look like by the time we get to the end of the season as well. So Darren needs to go back to having the kind of Darren Granger games that he had against Rhode Island, Connecticut, Charlotte, and Coastal Carolina. And he can do that. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the Sun Belt, whether he's running with the football or whether he's putting it in the air. He just came up against a very, very good Troy football team. I would say Troy's defense right now would be a little bit stronger than their offense is. But, again, offensively, they were able to keep their offense on the field more often than not last Saturday. So, Georgia State's going to have to go back and hopefully have games like they had against Coastal and Charlotte as we head into this stretch of games I call the middle portion of the schedule here that are not going to be easy ball games. None of them are going to be what we'll term easy or manageable games. We're not going into these games overconfident. Oh, yeah, we've got this. Oh, yeah, we've got that. No, at least I'm not going into any of those games, and I can pretty much assure you that Coach Elliott and his staff are not going into those games with that mindset either.
Dave, what are some of the things that Marshall does well when you've seen him on film, and what are the things that Georgia State can take advantage of that you see Marshall does not do as well?
Well, again, I don't know that they sling the ball around the field quite as much as, say, a Grayson McCall at Coastal Carolina. Or even Gunnar Watson at Troy. I'm sure they're, like everybody else, working on a balanced offense. I mentioned they've got one of the top running backs in the conference in Rasheen Ali. I think that's the key right there. You're not going to stop him I mean, I'd be shocked if at the end of the game we look at the stats and it says Rasheen Ali, 47 yards. I just don't see that happening. But Georgia State defensively, number one, going to have to get pressure on Cam Fancher, the starting quarterback, and they're going to have to keep an eye on where Ali is in the backfield. And, you know, the other thing that I know Georgia State has made an effort to improve based on who they brought in. You know, they moved Jontre Hunter from the outside to the inside linebacker spot. And, of course, he is now our leading tackler. But they brought in Kevin Swint from Clemson to kind of team up with Shamar McCullum, who came in from Wake Forest. Georgia State, if they could get pressure on the quarterback a lot more than they did on Gunnar Watson, that would go a long way to hopefully slowing them down a little bit offensively. I'll be anxious to see how they do. We're in an off week. Marshall has NC State this weekend. I'm going to be anxious to see what they run, how they go into that game against NC State to get a little bit of an idea of what we're going to see when they come into Atlanta on the 14th. But that running back is what really concerns me the most.
Dave, you know what? Thanks a lot for coming on today. We'll talk to you next week after you look at the film and watch the Marshall game against NC State. And we'll try to break down Marshall even further next week. And hopefully Georgia State has a good practice, and they'll be ready to go for the game on the 14th. Dave, thanks for coming on as always. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you. We'll talk to you guys next week. Have a good show.
Talk to you next week. That's Dave Cohen, the voice of the Georgia State Panthers. You can get him on Twitter at GA State Voice. You can get all of us at ATL Prime Sports. Myself at Corder Todd. JJ at JJ Get You One. Wayne at RWY Jr. And Larry at LG4 Real Though. And guys, that was a tough loss for Georgia State this week. They got beat on each side of line of scrimmage. And that's their first loss of the season. They moved to 4-1 and 1-1 in the Sun Belt. Like Dave said, schedule does not get any easier with Marshall coming up and then further conference games after that. It is indeed a gauntlet. Let's move on. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons. They got beat up front for the second consecutive week. The first week it was Detroit. The second week it was Jacksonville. And now they play the Texans, who have won 2 in a row. They've been real impressive. They beat Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, and now they beat Pittsburgh. What do the Falcons do, Larry? Is it time for them to pull Ritter? I personally think it's too soon. He's only had 7 starts, but there are a lot of folks that are rumbling to bring in Heineke now.
No, I don't think it's time to try to pull Ritter at all, because what I figured out is it has a little bit to do with him, but the majority of it is if the offensive line can't block the defenders coming after him, I don't care if you've got the second coming of Joe Montana behind the center, you're still not going to be able to do the things that you want to do accurately and precisely. And what we've seen is it's taken, I think, to be honest with you, I think what we've seen is the lack of Desmond Ritter playing in the preseason has really come to fruition as it pertains to how he's reacting when things are happening, because it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing with him. He'll have one bad half and then he'll have an amazing half, and I'm pretty sure Coach Smith is wanting to get to the point to where, hey, we've just got to play 4 consistent quarters and put it all together, because your defense is keeping you in football games. You just can't win when you're averaging 18, 19 points a game. That's just not going to cut it in today's NFL. Falcons defense, the only defensive concern I have with them is their inability to get to the quarterback. They're forcing pressure, but they're not able to get the sack. And that's what we're missing. And you got a kid that's coming in C.J. Stroud with the Texans that takes very good care of the football as a rookie. But the coach, D'Amico Ryans, has trusted him with the keys to the offense, and he's performing mightily. So the Falcons defense will be tested this week, no question about it. It's just time for Desmond Ritter to understand that you got to play within the realms of your offense. And I think teams know that if you get Robinson and Algier to where they only getting 2 or 3 yards of carry and you force Dez to beat you, then they can just pin their ears back and come back after him. And I think that's the key to the Atlanta Falcons having success, TC, is the big boys up front are going to have to give him longer than a second and a half to be able to read what's going on. And when he gets the opportunity, he's going to have to be more accurate with some of his passes.
Well, we mentioned before that, the Detroit game, the Jacksonville game, that Ritter was really fortunate not to throw a lot of interceptions in his previous 5 starts. And you know what? That's caught up with him. And the pressure, you're right. That offensive line is partly to blame. They can't pass block. Teams are sticking 8 in the box, daring Atlanta to throw the football. They can't do it. They're not pass blocking very well. The run game is not working. It doesn't matter who you've got at running back. If you don't have a hole, it's not going to do any good. So they're getting beat up front. And when you're getting beat up front, no matter if you got a rookie or a veteran, you have no chance. But now the luck has run out for Ritter. He is starting to throw interceptions. He threw a pick 6 last week. And Larry, you know what? Maybe a veteran quarterback will come along in 2 weeks, but you got to give Ritter time. But this offensive line was touted as a great offensive line. It was touted by the local media as a very good offensive line. And you know what? It has not been a very good offensive line the last 2 weeks. The defense was touted. Oh, we're going to get to the quarterback. We're getting to the quarterback. No, they're not getting to the quarterback. They've improved their personnel, but it's still not good enough. And this team has bottom 10 personnel in the NFL on the offensive line and defensive line, and it showed the last 2 weeks against Detroit and Jacksonville, and it's a major problem going forward, whoever plays quarterback, Larry.
Well, I'll be the first to tell you, TC, that the interior of the line is where the majority of that comes in. I mean, your center and your 2 guards are getting you annihilated. Both your tackles are handling their business, but the interior of that offensive line is where all that pressure is coming from. And I don't care what quarterback it is, unless you're Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson and can get out within a second of the ball hitting your hands from the center snap exchange. You've got to have time to be able to read and go through your progressions to see what's going to happen. You've got a team that has a head coach that is known for his defensive prowess. And you've seen what he was able to do. And everybody can say it's a fluke or not, TC, but when you beat Pittsburgh, the rookie quarterback, that's not something that you need to just say, oh, it was just a lucky break for the kid and for the Texans. DeMeco Ryans is building a culture there. And when you talk about personnel issues, I think more often than not, TC, I think what happens is I blame Tom Brady for this, and y'all gonna laugh at me when I say this. I blame Tom Brady. If Tom Brady had played up to Tom Brady expectations last year and not tickled the Falcons' fancy with the opportunity to still win that division, we'd have seen Desmond Ridder probably by game 4 last year instead of holding on to Marcus Mariota. And so we would have gotten more snaps with him under center so that by the time he took over this year, he would be much further along in the progression that he's seen. It's Tom Brady's fault. But now, all jokes aside, Atlanta.
The more games you play, obviously the more experience you have, and the much better you eventually become. I'm just really you mentioned the pressure up the middle. If you want to get to a quarterback, it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's Mahomes or Brady, whoever. If you can get pressure up the middle, the quarterback's toast. And you mentioned it. Their pressure up the middle on the Falcons' offensive line, their opponents, they've been a master at it. And when you look at the Texans on film, their opponents are not getting pressure up the middle, and it's allowed C.J. Stroud to really be uncomfortable. The amazing statistic for me for C.J. Stroud is he has not thrown an interception all season, and he's really starting to get it. The kid from Ohio State is starting to become fun with him, and you know what? He doesn't have a great rushing game. They only average 3 yards a rush, but they have managed to be able to give him just enough time on that offensive line, and he is pretty fleet-footed like Ritter. They're pretty similar. He's able to buy himself enough time to get the ball off. And, you know, it really is amazing Stroud's progress compared to Ritter's.
Oh, no doubt. And I'll even take it to this level. Everybody's seen what C.J. Stroud was able to do last year in the national semifinal playoff game against Georgia, who had, at the time, one of the most legendary defenses to ever play in college football history. And he was able to shred them to pieces. You know, so not comparing a normal NFL defense to where the Georgia Bulldogs defense was last year, but if he could go against that kind of pressure that was relentless all game long and hold his own, he has literally just been taking game after game. And he started off being a game manager, playing within the offense. And week after week, he gets more confidence. They take the reins off and let him do more things. And he's shown that he was well worth trading up for to go grab. Atlanta, different scenario, because Arthur Smith is a ground and pound head coach. Desmond Ritter was never meant to throw the ball 25, 30, 35 times a game. He's meant to probably do it 15 to 20, while Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier have 15 to 20 carries apiece. The beautiful thing for the Falcons this week is Cordero Patterson is expected to play. That will give them a little bit of an X-factor weapon, shall we say, to be able to utilize his quickness and his toughness to be another weapon for Dez to be able to have access to quickly if the Texans' interior defensive line is able to create as much pressure as the Falcons' last two opponents have done. So while I don't think it will be as severe as what Jacksonville's and Detroit's pass rush was, I do think the Texans can create pressure. I think they can create problems. But I also believe this game being in Atlanta is going to serve Desmond Ritter well because he has not lost a home game yet.
Well, the Texans have 7 sacks on the season, and they're definitely going to have to get a helmet on Greenard, the defensive end. He's got 3 of them. And, you know, the good news is the strength of the secondary is the strength of the Falcons' defense. The bad news, it is in the secondary, and it's not up front. And they're not going to be. And if the defensive line can't get to the quarterback, they can't cover the receivers all day. And Nico Collins and Dell are a handful. And Collins averages almost 20 yards a catch. Dell averages 17. Going to be a major problem for that Falcons secondary to cover Tank Dell and Nico Collins if they can't get to the quarterback.
No, it's always going to look. It don't matter who you're playing against. If you can't ever get to the quarterback, these guys are in the NFL for a reason. And if you let anybody sit back there, they will eventually pick you apart. And that's why it is going to be imperative that Coach Nielsen dials up scheme after scheme, because what worked last week for the Falcons defense is a mixture of sending Bud Dupree, Arnold Ebiketie, and Grady Jarrett. And it opened it up so much that David Onyemata was able to get a sack and give pressure the second half. But at that point, once the interceptions had been thrown, it was too late. But it's good to see that the Falcons are willing to make the coaching adjustments that are necessary to put their team in the best position to win. The problem with that is you got a team with expectations preseason of competing for the division. And although they're only one game out, the way that they played the last couple of weeks has taking that hot air balloon full of momentum and started putting a leak in it, and you're starting to see it gradually come down. And if I'm Coach Smith, I don't want to see that because the fans are so used to this mentality as an Atlanta fan, man. People just don't understand. We so accustomed to losing, or we're so accustomed to be excited and have something taken away from us. It's almost like a little kid mentality. So if Coach Smith wants to keep that momentum and the fans high and the vibe, you know, exciting around Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Sunday, they need to have a game plan ready to put Desmond Ridder, and even if you have to get the ball out of his hands with 3-step drops and a quick slant, screens, jet sweeps, things of that nature to keep the Texans defense off balance and keep your quarterback in a good mindset. Because once he starts getting hit, we've seen what happens, TC.
It's all young quarterbacks that get hit. They eventually succumb to the pressure and turn the football over. You just talked about losing. Let's move on and actually talk about winning in the Atlanta Braves. Just to let everybody know, you can listen to all our shows on Apple, Spotify. You can go to Twitter, YouTube. You can, wherever ATL Prime Sports is, try to find it, subscribe, and like. Now on to the Atlanta Braves, the opposite. They win games. They won more baseball games than anybody in Major League Baseball. They won 104 games this year. Everything's hunky-dory right now. But I have two concerns for Atlanta. Let's get to the first one. Number one is having to sit out and wait 4 or 5 days to play a baseball game. This game is there's a reason why you play each and every day. And that's that you got to stay in a rhythm to play baseball. And I know the Falcons are doing the simulation, the game, and the crowds coming down to Truist Park and all that. To me, I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a distraction. I'm not a fan of it all. It's great for the fans. I don't think it's a great move by the organization to have fans down there for a simulated game when you're trying to get ready for the playoffs. You've waited all season for this. You've been the best team in baseball, and now you're doing this, and you're sitting, waiting for an opponent to play. I just think it's a huge advantage, whether it's the Phillies or Marlins, because they're going to come in sharp. The only advantage it would be for Atlanta is for players that are nicked up, that are injured. But to me, it's a big concern. I would rather be a wild card winner, honestly, than a division winner, the way Major League Baseball has set this up.
I can understand that point of view, but I'm going to tell you why I like it. If you're playing a simulated game and you're giving them 7 to 9 innings, you're letting people start, like, for example, with the game yesterday, A.J. Smith-Shawver started the game, and with the way the starting pitching and the bullpen have had issues all year long, getting those guys to get valuable reps, because they're going to be needed and counted on and depended upon in order for the Braves to finally bring this thing home 2 out of the last 3 years. I like the fact that you keep your main boys, you keep them jokers going, you keep everybody motivated, because the alternative is just to sit and watch TV. You might take normal batting practice or normal pitching practice, but at the end of that, you're at home watching everybody else. The fact that you're in the stadium, fans are out, I don't know how many attended or whatnot, but what I do know is every opportunity.
Let me stop you there. The fans are coming in for free, so they're not charging anybody, which is great for the fans. But really, I don't care if you can't simulate a real game in this sport. And the longer you sit out, I think it's the harder to get going.
Well, let me ask you this. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair, said, in order to be the man, you got to beat the man. And all 2023, several teams have tried to beat them in series, and very few has been able to accomplish that. The one that has given me any types of apprehension is one of the teams playing in the wild card series awaiting the Braves, and that team is the Philadelphia Phillies. And the reason the Phillies give me apprehension is because the way the Braves have won games all year long is they've been in slugfest. Well, Philadelphia is one of the teams in the National League playoff series that can slug toe-to-toe with Atlanta on any given day. Zach Wheeler has been phenomenal and has been the de facto ace for that team since Aaron Nola's gone down. It's kind of like with Atlanta, if everything goes the way according to the way it looks like it's going to go, you're going to have game 1 to be Zach Wheeler against Spencer Strider. And we know what the Phillies did to Strider in the playoffs last year. Spencer's going to have to come with his A1 game, and we can't have a Philadelphia bomb session taken off in Truist Park when they show up next week. Spencer's going to have to do what allowed him to be the number one pitcher in strikeouts this season, and he's going to have to mow that. If we can get 6 innings out of him, I'd love 7, but if we can get 6 out of him and about 10 to 13 strikeouts, I will consider that a great performance. But when you got Acuna, Albies, Riley, Olsen, Ozuna, Harris, the numbers, I mean, the names keep going on and on. They are the best for a reason. So I would much rather them be practicing in their own stadium with some fans being able to watch, keeping them loose, keeping their mindset where it is, than to be at home surfing fire sticks looking at other teams playing playoffs. Wayne, what you think, man? You think it's the same thing?
Well, I'm still kind of hoping that Miami can win 2 games and you don't have to worry about Philadelphia no more.
That would be amazing, man. Look, I would much rather play Miami in the NLDS than to play Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is coming in real warm. The one thing that I was really concerned about, and TC can talk about this as well, is when Trey Turner was having his big slump, the Phillies were playing, they were playing 500 baseball. Now that he's gotten in a pretty good groove, they've started winning again, and they're basically repeating what they did last year, taking that end of the season momentum right into a wild card spot, right into a division spot. So while it's too early to tell if they're going to be able to beat Miami, because Lord, Miami, if y'all don't do nothing else for me this season, put them jokers back up there in cheesesteak territory. But TC, it is.
Hey, Larry, you mentioned the offense for the Phillies. If you know. And the second question to this Braves topic is, to me, when Atlanta's rotation, that's my second concern. I never thought it would be, but it is a concern because you have Max Fried. He finished the season with an IL with a blister. Charlie Morton's out with a finger injury. Fried through the 5 innings in the moderated game at Truist Park with a Band-Aid and all that jazz. But they're not facing the Phillies in a game that it's actually going to count. And you're going to put a lot of pressure, on Strider. And there is a concern after Fried throws a game. The concern is how frequently may Fried be available. Just yesterday it was brought out that, hey, maybe when he throws, he won't be able to pitch for another 5 or 6 days. There's huge concerns. Kyle Wright's been injured this year. Bryce Elder's been inconsistent, but he's been more consistent than inconsistent. And then you're going to face a Phillies lineup, which you mentioned, in Trey Turner. You know what? Atlanta's going to have its hands full big time in round 1.
Oh, no doubt. I'll even take it to this level, TC. Let me throw you to 2021. Does the name Tucker Davidson mean anything to you? Does the name Ian Anderson stand out to you?
Yep.
Those were 2 very little-known pitchers that had to go out and have a outstanding World Series performance in a game in front of enemy territory in Houston, and they came out and they played wonderful. They both pitched a great game. I think in order for, and I've said this on many different interviews and podcasts and things of this nature, but the key to Atlanta's pitching staff is going to be Charlie Morton as a starter, because usually as he goes, they go. In the bullpen is going to be AJ Minter. The one thing I will say about Raisel Iglesias is he was good more than he was bad, but when he was bad, it was pretty awful. So if we can keep him, if we can get Charlie to be curveball, strike him out, Charlie, instead of curveball giving up 5 to 6 home runs, Charlie, you may have a AJ Smith Shawver, you may have a Darius Vines, or somebody else that may have to step up and pitch a game that they weren't expected, and pitch a good game to keep that offense in it. If you can get a pitcher to give you 9 times out of 10, 3 to 4 runs with this Braves team, if you can keep the other team to 3 to 4 runs, more often than not, 80% of the time Atlanta will win that game. So, as you stated, TC, the concern for me is just starting pitching and bullpen. It's just pitching, period. I'm not concerned with the layoff. I'm not concerned with the roster. I'm just concerned with pitching, period.
Larry, you hit the nail on the head. Everybody talks about the Braves, how they slugged their way to a 2021 championship. That's partly true, but they got hot with the pitching staff from August 1st on, and that's the main reason why they won the World Series. Number two, this Braves rotation, pre-All-Star break, 3.63 ERA, 239 opponent batting average. Post-All-Star break, 4.76, 251 batting average, and the Braves are 16-13 in their last 29 games. This has not been the same team, the 100-win team, the last month of the season. Those are very concerning trends for me coming into the postseason.
I can definitely understand, and even with 16-13, all you got to do is win 3 out of 5, 4 out of 7, and 4 out of 7. You know, the Phillies are trying to get the 3 out of 5 done or the 2 out of 3 done. Next, they're going to try to do the 4 out of 7. What I've seen all season long from Atlanta, if you give them 7 games, they can beat you 4 out of those 7. The only times that has went opposite is teams that they should have beat has snuck up and beat them. The first series you think about is the Oakland Athletics. When that went down, you know, that was a surprise. You see, everybody will talk about the Washington series at the end of the season, but the Braves were like, okay, we're done with that at that point. But I trust Brian Snitker's management. I know a lot of Atlanta fans just heard me say that, just had heart palpitations and might have to go get IVs to be able to make it through the rest of the show. But I trust what Brian Snitker and Ron Washington and the rest of the Braves coaching staff has been able to do with this team, even in adversity when I don't think the team has been 100% all year long. You know, so I'm looking forward, because to me it's still the pitching staff. If I can get Strider, Elder, Freed, heck, if I have to have Jared Schuster to throw a game, no, if I can get those 3 of Strider, Elder, and Freed to play like they can play, I am very confident that the Braves will win this division and move on to the NLCS. Now, when you get there,
we're about to find out, Larry. Let's move on to our last topic. Urban Meyer rumors, opinions. People want him to go to Michigan State. We'll keep this topic short. We'll probably talk about it because it's just right now the flower is just starting to grow. But you know, to me, Michigan State, they've had enough problems off the field lately. You're going to bring Urban Meyer in there, who's one heck of a coach. Has won everywhere he's gone. Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State. Yes, he's done it all. And he's still under 60 years old. He's an Ohio guy. No way. And they said it today on on social media. And I don't believe this for a minute. No way, no how does an Ohio State guy go and coach in the state of Michigan at Michigan State, especially in Ann Arbor. But they won't be. Certainly, let's say, throw him money that we've never, ever, ever seen in the sport. I don't see Urban Meyer a ghost chance of going to Michigan State. And if you're Michigan State, why do you want to do it? You're already throwing $80 million at Mel Tucker, and that surely didn't work out. Why don't you go find your own Urban Meyer? A guy like Mike Elko, Jonathan Smith, Jake Dickert at Washington State, Smith at Oregon State, Elko at Duke. I tell you, my guy would be Glenn Schumann at Georgia, the defensive coordinator. 6 national championships, 4 at Bama, 2 at Georgia. He's only 33 years old. Give a guy like that a chance. A, you don't have to pay him a boatload of money. And B, he's got one heck of a resume. And C, Michigan State needs a defense desperately. Your thoughts on that quickly, Larry?
No, real quick, fast, and in a hurry. I like the way you pointed toward giving the DC at Georgia a shot because of his resume. But I'm going to use your own statement against you. Follow the money from Pee Wee to the pros, and you'll find your answer. That is why Michigan State would do it, and that's why Urban Meyer would do it. It would already fit his persona. He's already the most hated man in college sports. It would just add to his villain mantra to show up in East Lansing, Michigan, wearing the green and white with the big S on his chest and saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy and pleased to be the new head coach of your Spartan football team." And son, it would do nothing but just wreak bedlam through the Big Ten.
Well, you know what, Larry? Urban Meyer is a quick fixer. He's never been with the NIL. He's never been with the transfer portal. You've seen Deion Sanders fix it quickly. If he did come back, he could fix Michigan State quickly. But here's the problem. The problem is Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Michigan. Those are 6 really good ranked football teams, and Wisconsin and Iowa. That's 2 more. That's 8. They're not ranked, but they're better than average. A conference that is going to get a lot better in a hurry. It would be a tough nut to crack for Urban Meyer to come in right away. The expectations would be through the roof. And look, you bring him in. I like how you said follow the money, because the money will give you the answer. And if Michigan State's money answer is we're not throwing a ton, then they can go after a guy like Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But if they're going for the money, they are going for an experienced head coach. I do agree with you on that part.
No, you're definitely, it's just, I see how this college football thing is panning out. People want the big splash. They want the big name. And when you're going through, here's the one thing against it that I don't like. If you're coming out of a coach that's already leaving your program in the midst of a scandal, why would you bring in another coach who's always had scandals surrounding his name? It's like you're jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. It makes no sense logically when you got all of these talented coordinators and former head coaches that could get your kids where they needed to be and put your name on the map and still be competitive in what is not really it's Ohio State and Michigan, and that's pretty much about it. When it comes to the Big Ten, if you go all the way across it, you could get right in there and still compete for a Big Ten championship and be right in for the expanded college football playoff here in a year or two. So
I like what you said there, Larry, the expanding college football. Not only is the Big Ten expanding, but the college football playoff is expanding. I like that correlation. Wayne, you got a quick thought on this because we got to go to pick 6.
No, I don't care.
All right. Well, you know what, Wayne, Larry, we'll address this subject down the road because it's not going away. The flower is going to bloom out. The question is, where does the flower bloom to, and who does Michigan State get to plant the seed for the next head coach? Better yet, Michigan, will they have Harbaugh next year themselves? We'll go to that another time. Guys, let's go to the pick 6, and let's do it. I'm going to do the Falcons game last. I'm going to do it last. We're going to go Oklahoma at Texas. Texas, 6.5-point favorite. We don't have a lot of time. We already know it's at noon on ABC in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Wayne, who do you got?
Oklahoma points.
You're going to take the points. Wayne, Larry, what about you?
Open horns. I'm taking Texas.
You're taking Texas to cover. I believe I was looking for JJ. I think he has Texas to cover. Me, boy, I tell you what, this is a tough one. Oklahoma has not been tested this season. They're 5-0. The Horns have beat Alabama. I believe they'll cover. I'll take Texas too. Let's go on to our next game. LSU 3-2 at Missouri. LSU favored by 6.5. It's on noon on ESPN. The over and under 63.5. Wayne, what do you got?
I'm taking Missouri in the points in this one. I believe Missouri is much better than everybody fails to think they are.
Well, I tell you what, they beat Kansas State, who was ranked when they beat them. Larry, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with Wayne, man. I think Missouri's defense is good enough to keep LSU's offense under wraps. The one thing that I fear is LSU trying to get into a shootout again, just as they did last week. They're not going to win a lot of those games. If you get into a shootout with a team, I think Missouri has enough of a defense to be able to keep them compounded. I think LSU wins, but I think it's more of a 3-4 point game than a 6.5 game.
Larry, JJ picks LSU to cover, and if LSU does not win, Brian Kelly and his Southern Iced Tea is going to melt very quickly in the glass. Me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take LSU. They've got it covered. No, I'm going to take Missouri. The reason why is I've seen LSU get physically manhandled by FSU, and when they got manhandled by Ole Miss physically up front, that caught my attention. I'm taking Missouri. I don't even know if LSU wins the game. If they do, it's less than 6.5. And let's go on. Wayne, we've got Kentucky and Georgia. Georgia favored by 14.5. Over and under 48.5. Wayne, what do you got?
I'm taking Kentucky in the points. That's an awful lot of points. I can't pass it up.
The Dogs are at home. Wayne, do they bark?
No, I'm taking Kentucky in the points over Georgia.
No, yeah, Larry, what do the Dogs do?
No, the Dogs, I think they're going to rout Kentucky, and the reason I'm taking Georgia to cover, but I think they're going to get back home after the scare that they had against Auburn last week, and I think they're going to put up a show at Stanford Stadium.
I think they put a can on Kentucky, too. I think Georgia covers. All right, go to the National Football League. Howard Cosell, ABC Monday Night Football. Nope, that's not ABC Monday Night Football game. It's Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on the NFL Network. Oh, we've heard this team play Sunday at 9:30 a.m. before. The Jaguars, the Buffalo Bills versus the Jaguars. Bills are 3-1. Jags are 2-2. Buffalo favored by 5.5. The over and under is 48. What do you got, Wayne?
I'm taking Bills to cover this because I no longer like Jacksonville Jaguars.
They beat the snot out of the Falcons last week, who I call fool's gold. Larry, what do you say?
Nah, Buffalo wins and Buffalo covers. I think they're going to beat them by 2 touchdowns, man. The offense that Buffalo has is going to be way too much for the Jaguars defense to be able to carry, even though Jacksonville does have a great defense. Well, I'm not going to call it great. They have a good defense that is manageable, but Josh Allen is a whole lot different than Desmond Ridder.
I was wrong on the Bills last week. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. I say Buffalo covers, and so does JJ. Let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. 3-1 at the 4-0 49ers. San Francisco favored by 4. The over and under is 45. The over-under on the Bills and Jaguars was 48. Sorry, I missed that. Wayne, give it to me.
I'm taking the Cowboys in the points on this one. I just think that they're a better team than the 49ers are right now.
JJ thinks like you. Larry, what do you say? Sam Fran at home. JJ has Dallas covering too.
While Dallas has probably one of the best defenses in the NFL, San Francisco is one of the best defenses as well, and they're going to match each other. The one difference is I think Brock Purdy is going to have himself a whale of a football game, and I think you're going to see Christian McCaffrey come out wide open. Give me the Niners by 10, baby, 49ers.
Wow, that's a lot. I think San Francisco covers too at home, but barely. And, you know, the Cowboys, they haven't played. They played the lower echelon in the NFL. And you know, they lost to the Cardinals on the road in Arizona. I think they lose to the 49ers. Their defense is just as tough as Dallas's, and their offensive line is tougher. And they got a quarterback that don't make mistakes like Dak Prescott does. Give me the 49ers the cover and the 4. Our last game, I saved this one. The Texans 2-2. We talked about it. The Falcons 2-2. Atlanta 1-point favorite, over and under 41.5. Wayne, go ahead. We know your take.
Yeah, I'm taking the Falcons to cover on this one.
Let's see. I think JJ did fool's gold too. He picked the Falcons. Larry, what do you got?
I want to pick the Texans with all my heart. I really do. I just really do. In fact, you know what? Matter of fact, the only reason I thought about picking the Falcons is because Desmond Ridder has yet to lose a game at home in his tenure as Falcons quarterback. But I just can't do it, man. I see too many holes in that interior offensive line for the Falcons, man. Give me the Texans to cover, and not only that, but to win.
Texans will cover and win. Fool's gold to take the Falcons. They're just not physical enough on the Falcons. You guys know that song back in the day? Physical. You gotta be physical. The Falcons aren't physical enough on each line of the scrimmage, and I'm taking the Texans. All right, that'll do the show. Larry, let's see. Wayne is 18-12, 3-3 last week. Larry JJ 17-13. He was 3-3 last week. That knucklehead. Larry was 3-3 last week, 15-15 overall, and I'm bringing up the rear at 14-16, 2-4. I'm due for a big week. We shall see. That'll end the show, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for Dave Cohen to come on. Larry, thanks for joining us. Wayne, thank you as always. We thank you for listening. I'm Todd Corder. Have a great week, everybody, and enjoy the football game. That'll do it. I'm out.